My name is David. I'm 69 years old, and 18 months ago, I came within a single signature of losing everything I'd built after retiring to the Philippines. It wasn't because I committed a crime. It wasn't because my visa expired. It wasn't because I overstayed. It happened because I misunderstood one simple immigration rule that I'd read dozens of times but never fully understood. I was standing inside the Bureau of Immigration office with my passport in one hand and a notice in the other when the officer looked at me and calmly said, "Sir, according to our records, you're not allowed to leave the country until this is resolved." My return flight to Los Angeles left in 36 hours. My daughter was waiting for me to attend my granddaughter's wedding. I honestly believed I was about to be deported, or worse, permanently barred from returning. Thankfully, neither happened. But fixing one careless mistake cost me nearly $2,000, weeks of stress, and taught me a lesson every foreign retiree needs to hear before moving overseas. This is exactly what happened. Before retiring, I spent almost 40 years working as an electrical contractor in Sacramento. Numbers made sense to me. Building codes made sense. Permits made sense. Rules existed for a reason. When my wife Linda passed away after a long battle with breast cancer, retirement stopped feeling like something to enjoy. The house became too quiet. The days became too long. Our two sons both lived on opposite sides of the country with families of their own. I wasn't broke. Between my pension and Social Security, I received just under $4,200 every month. My house had nearly tripled in value since the late 1990s. Financially, life was comfortable. Emotionally, I felt completely lost. Like many retirees, I discovered YouTube videos about retiring abroad. Again and again, the Philippines appeared. Friendly people, affordable healthcare, English everywhere. Lower cost of living, warm weather all year. I researched for nearly 8 months before making the move. I watched immigration videos, read Facebook groups, joined retirement forums, downloaded government checklists. By the time I boarded my flight, I genuinely believed I knew exactly what I was doing. That confidence turned out to be my biggest mistake. I settled in Cebu. Nothing extravagant. Just a clean one-bedroom condominium close to shopping centers and a private hospital. Rent was about $580 a month. Utilities averaged less than $100. I hired a woman to clean twice a month for less than what I used to spend on dinner in California. Life became wonderfully simple. Every 60 days I renewed my tourist visa. The process was straightforward. Take a number. Wait. Pay the fee. Receive another stamp. After the third extension, I stopped worrying about immigration altogether. It became routine, like renewing car registration back home. I even started helping newcomers in online retirement groups. Whenever someone asked about visas, I'd confidently explain how easy everything was. Looking back, I knew just enough to become overconfident, not enough to recognize what I didn't know. That combination is dangerous. About 14 months after arriving, my oldest son called. His daughter, my first grandchild, was getting married in California that October. Missing the wedding wasn't an option. I booked my ticket almost immediately. 3 weeks before departure, I checked my passport to make sure everything looked fine. That's when I noticed something I'd ignored for months. My latest visa extension receipt mentioned an exit clearance certificate. I'd seen those words before. Dozens of times. Every expat forum mentioned them. Most people simply called it an ECC. I assumed it only applied to people who had overstayed or violated immigration rules. After all, I'd renewed every visa on time. Never missed a payment. Never broken any laws. Why would I need special permission just to leave? I convinced myself it didn't apply to me. That assumption nearly ruined everything. 2 days before my flight, another American retiree asked a simple question over coffee. "You already picked up your ECC?" I laughed. "My what?" His smile disappeared immediately. "How long have you been here?" I told him. His face changed color. He explained that foreigners who stay in the Philippines beyond a certain period generally need an exit clearance certificate before departing. Without it, airlines may refuse boarding. Immigration may stop you. My stomach dropped. I drove straight to the Bureau of Immigration office. The waiting room was packed. When my number was finally called, the officer looked at my passport, typed for a minute, and nodded. "You need an ECC." I asked how long it would take. She looked at her calendar. Normally 3 to 5 working days. My flight left in 2. I felt every ounce of confidence disappear. #. I almost got deported because of one stupid mistake. Here's what you must know. Part 5. The longest 36 hours of my retirement. When the immigration officer told me the normal processing time was 3 to 5 working days, I honestly thought I was going to miss my granddaughter's wedding. I explained my situation as calmly as I could. "My flight is Thursday morning." She looked at the ticket I'd printed and nodded sympathetically. "I understand, sir, but processing takes time." There wasn't any anger in her voice. No accusation, just procedure. For the first time since moving to the Philippines, I realized something important. Immigration officers aren't there to solve your planning mistakes. They're there to enforce the rules. I walked outside and sat on a concrete bench in the parking lot for nearly 20 minutes. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know whether to cancel my flight. I didn't know if my travel insurance would cover something that was entirely my fault. Eventually, another foreign retiree sitting nearby asked if everything was okay. I explained what had happened. He smiled in a way that told me he'd seen this before. "You're not the first." He recommended speaking to an accredited visa assistance agency nearby. Normally, I avoid paying people to handle paperwork I can do myself. This time, I made an exception. The agency couldn't magically skip immigration procedures, but they knew exactly which forms were missing, which office windows to visit first, and how to avoid wasting precious hours standing in the wrong lines. By late afternoon, my application had finally been accepted. Then came the hardest part: waiting. Every hour felt like an entire day. Part 6. The mistake that cost far more than the fees. People often ask how much my mistake actually cost. The government fees themselves weren't outrageous. The real expense came from everything surrounding them. Because I wasn't sure I'd receive the ECC in time, I paid nearly $480 to change my airline ticket to a later departure, just in case. I extended my hotel reservation in Manila for 3 extra nights because I couldn't risk being stranded without a room. That added another $320. Transportation between government offices, photocopies, passport photos, document printing, and countless small expenses added another couple $100. Then there was the agency fee, worth every penny, in hindsight. Altogether, my simple misunderstanding cost me just under $1,900. Not because immigration fined me, because poor planning is almost always expensive. What bothered me most wasn't the money. It was knowing every dollar could have been avoided by spending 15 extra minutes researching before booking my flight. The hardest moment wasn't sitting in immigration. It was calling my son. He answered immediately. "Dad, are you already at the airport?" I told him everything. There was a long silence. Finally, he laughed softly. I thought something terrible had happened. To him, this was just a travel problem. To me, it felt enormous. I hadn't told anyone how frightened I'd been. When you retire overseas, paperwork becomes more than paperwork. Your passport isn't just identification. It's your connection to your family, your ability to travel, your legal status, your future. For nearly 2 days, I genuinely feared I might miss one of the most important moments in my granddaughter's life because of something completely preventable. Thankfully, 24 hours before my revised flight, the agency called. "Mr. Collins, your ECC is ready." I've rarely felt relief that intense. I picked it up that afternoon, checked it at least 6 times before leaving the office, and tucked it inside my passport as though it were made of gold. That experience completely changed how I prepare for international travel. Now I start planning every trip at least 6 weeks before departure. I keep both printed and digital copies of every immigration document. Every visa extension receipt goes into a labeled folder. Every deadline is entered into my phone calendar with multiple reminders. Most importantly, I never assume. If I'm ever uncertain about an immigration requirement now, I don't rely on Facebook groups, YouTube comment sections, or stories I hear over coffee from other retirees. Instead, I go directly to the Bureau of Immigration or consult the official information that's currently available. It takes a little more time, and sometimes it means making an extra trip to an office or waiting in line to ask what feels like a simple question. But I've learned that spending an hour getting the right answer is far better than spending days trying to fix a mistake that could have been avoided. Don't misunderstand me. I still think those online communities are incredibly valuable. In fact, they helped me tremendously when I was first planning my move. The people there are generous with their time, eager to share their experiences, and often willing to answer questions that would otherwise leave newcomers feeling overwhelmed. Some of the closest friends I've made in the Philippines are people I originally met through expat groups online. The problem isn't that people are trying to give bad advice. The problem is that immigration rules don't stand still. Policies change. Procedures change. Required documents change. Processing times change. Sometimes the changes are minor, and sometimes they're significant enough to affect whether you're allowed to leave the country, renew your stay, or complete a transaction without delays. Someone who went through the process 6 months ago may be describing rules that no longer exist. Someone who had a smooth experience in one city may discover the process works slightly differently somewhere else. Even 2 retirees who visit the same office a few months apart can have completely different experiences because forms, requirements, or internal procedures have been updated. I learned that lesson in the most uncomfortable way possible. Today, when newcomers ask me questions about visas or immigration, I answer very differently than I used to. A couple of years ago, I would have confidently said, "Here's exactly what you need to do." Now I usually smile and say, "Here's what happened to me. Here's how I handled it. But please verify the current requirements yourself before making any plans." That may sound like a small difference, but it really isn't. One approach shares personal experience. The other assumes personal experience is universal. One acknowledges that circumstances change. The other pretends nothing ever does. When you're talking about immigration, confidence can easily be mistaken for accuracy, and I never want to be responsible for someone making an expensive decision based on information that may no longer be current. Looking back, my biggest mistake wasn't forgetting about the exit clearance certificate itself. The paperwork was simply the final symptom. The real mistake happened much earlier. It began the moment I convinced myself that because I'd successfully renewed my visa several times, I understood the entire immigration system. Every smooth visa extension gave me a little more confidence. Every successful visit to the immigration office made me feel like I'd figured everything out. Eventually, I stopped double-checking things because nothing had gone wrong before. That's a dangerous mindset. Confidence slowly becomes routine. Routine becomes complacency. Complacency becomes assumption. And assumptions have a habit of becoming very expensive. In my case, the cost wasn't just financial. Yes, I spent nearly $2,000 changing flights, extending hotel stays, paying transportation costs, and hiring professional assistants to make sure everything was completed correctly. But the emotional cost was much greater. For nearly 2 days, I genuinely believed I might miss one of the most important moments in my granddaughter's life because I'd overlooked a requirement that had been sitting in front of me all along. Those were long, sleepless nights. I replayed every decision I'd made since moving overseas, asking myself how someone who considered himself careful could overlook something so important. The answer wasn't that I was careless. It was that I had become comfortable. Comfort has a way of making us skip the very steps that once kept us safe. Despite all of that, I don't regret retiring in the Philippines. Not for a second. The people here have shown me incredible kindness from the day I arrived. I've built genuine friendships with both Filipinos and fellow retirees from around the world. I've discovered a slower pace of life that suits me far better than the constant rush I left behind in California. I've learned to appreciate simple mornings, afternoon walks along the waterfront, conversations at neighborhood cafes, and sunsets that remind me every day why I made this move in the first place. One stressful week didn't erase any of those experiences. If anything, it made me appreciate them even more. But it also changed the way I approach living abroad. Today, I respect the paperwork every bit as much as I enjoy the beaches. I plan every international trip weeks in advance. I review my passport, visa stamps, receipts, and travel requirements long before I ever think about packing a suitcase. I keep both printed and digital copies of important documents. Calendar reminders are set well before renewal dates arrive. And whenever something seems even slightly unclear, I ask questions immediately instead of assuming I'll figure it out later. If you're thinking about retiring overseas, whether it's the Philippines or anywhere else, here's the advice I wish someone had impressed upon me before I ever boarded that first flight. Don't wait until the week before your departure to review your travel documents. Read every notice you receive, even the ones that seem routine. Keep every receipt, every approval, and every official document in one safe place. Ask questions before you think you need answers. Never assume that because you've completed a process once, you'll automatically understand every rule connected to it. Most immigration problems don't begin with bad intentions. They don't begin with people trying to break the rules. They begin with ordinary retirees, people just like me, who slowly convince themselves they already know enough. I certainly did. Thankfully, my story ended far better than it could have. I made it to California only 1 day later than planned. I still walked my granddaughter down the aisle. I still danced with my family at the reception. I still watched her begin a new chapter of her life, surrounded by the people who loved her most. And after the wedding, I returned to the Philippines with a much greater appreciation for something I used to take for granted. Every time I open my passport now and see that exit clearance certificate tucked safely inside, it reminds me that one overlooked detail nearly turned a joyful family celebration into the biggest regret of my retirement. The certificate itself is just a piece of paper. What it represents is something much more important. It's a reminder to stay humble, to never stop learning, and to remember that living overseas isn't just about enjoying a lower cost of living or beautiful weather. It's also about respecting the responsibilities that come with being a guest in another country. If sharing my experience helps even one retiree avoid the stress, expense, and sleepless nights I went through, then those difficult days weren't wasted. And next week, I'm going to show you the 5 hidden expenses that quietly drained nearly $15,000 during my first year in the Philippines. Costs that nobody mentioned in the retirement videos I watched before I packed my bags.